Hi, this is Jeffrey Kurt Financial Group. Today's Wednesday, March 11, 2026. So today, as we look at things, not much different than things looked on Monday. Although on Monday, we had a big rally. I mentioned that the setup was there. And sure enough, the news triggered by perhaps the war being ending and that the oil would be moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And that was all good news, and it kind of triggered the rally. But the setup was there from terms of positioning that it could be a pretty big rally, and certainly it was. This morning we've had some, and yesterday and this morning, kind of similar setups where the stock market's been real choppy. The oil market up one day, down. I mean, it's up to 120 on Monday. It's down to the low 80s, mid 80s this morning. And, that could move back up because any news that's negative on either the Iranians fighting back or, closing of the Strait of Hormuz and oil not flowing. On one hand, I think that we'd all like to, consider and work towards some sort of solution and getting oil moving because, it's so important to everybody on both sides. On the other hand, I think that Iran and the government there are, kind of like an injured animal that's being cornered and anything can happen. I mean, this is also a group of people that just killed 30,000 of their own citizens because of protests recently. This is a recent item. And so if they did that to their own people, there was, I think anything's possible on what they could do. So again, looking at it, fortunately or unfortunately, the markets are tied to the price of oil, which is tied to the Strait of Hormuz, and any news from that dictates the direction and probably the size of the move as well. Looking forward, I think you got to kind of think about things differently and how things may look 5 or 6 months from now, and oil prices may continue to be elevated. So what's that mean? One thing I'll point out is that interest rates continue to kind of keep climbing higher. And I think that's somewhat of a inflation premium. Then we had inflation this morning, CPI at 2.4%. That was in line with expectations. However, that's looking in the rearview mirror at February, whereas in future months, we're going to have higher CPI. And maybe that's what the interest rates are predicting and discounting. And then also, what do those interest rates do to the economy? How strong of a headwind is it to the corporate world? So, a lot going on. Oracle last night, good numbers. That's helping the tech sector today. But again, I think everything kind of goes back to the price of oil and also how much turmoil there is in the Middle East and specifically the Strait of Hormuz. We'll leave it there. Please let us know any questions, comments, what your thoughts are concerning the markets, concerning all the current events. We'll be back on Friday. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.